Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Advocacy Power of Native Gardens. I'm Sarah Ressing, Wild Ones Education and Program Coordinator, and today we're going to focus on how public native gardens can be powerful tools for advocacy and education. So before I introduce all of our great speakers and our moderator, I want to thank Monarch Joint Venture and the U.S. Forest Service International Programs for providing grant funding that helped support the chapter projects that you'll hear about today. As we get started, I have a few notes. This webinar is hosted on YouTube Live. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. If you'd like to hide the chat, you can enter full screen mode, and closed captioning is available in your settings. You can also pause or rewind using controls at the bottom of this player. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Wild Ones channel for more great content like this. For those of you who are new to Wild Ones, we are a nonprofit membership organization devoted to promoting native plants and landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. Our mission comes to life through the grassroots efforts of local Wild Ones chapters, along with national programs and resources like this webinar. If you're not a Wild Ones member, we hope that you'll join us in helping native plants and natural landscapes thrive in every community. At the local level, Wild Ones chapters offer a knowledgeable, hands-on, and supportive community. Chapter programs include garden tours, speakers, conferences, as well as plant sales, exchanges, and seed collections. Local chapters are a great place to network with other nature enthusiasts and learn more about native plants. Wild Ones is also an inclusive community where diverse voices and backgrounds make us stronger. We welcome everyone to be a part of this movement, and by connecting with your local Wild Ones chapter, you can take meaningful action. And finally, programs like this one would not be possible without generous support from all of you, so please consider donating to Wild Ones tonight. Wild Ones' vision is native plants and natural landscapes in every community, and your donation will help us reach that goal. But beyond donations, there are so many ways you can contribute to our mission. You can volunteer at the local or national level, certify your habitat, or dive into recommended reading lists. Every action helps make a difference in creating a healthy planet, so visit wildones.org to learn more and get involved. Now I'm excited to introduce and turn it over to our moderator. Kelly Capuzzi is the Demonstration Garden Chair for Wild Ones Hocking Hills in Ohio. She manages the Logan Community Garden and has played a key role in developing several native plant demonstration gardens in her community. As a certified volunteer pollinator specialist and an aquatic biologist, Kelly brings both scientific expertise and hands-on community experience to her work with Wild Ones. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Capuzzi, and I'm excited to share a bit about our chapter's work and how we use native plant gardens to connect with our community and inspire action. The Hocking Hills chapter is passionate about promoting native plants and pollinator conservation throughout Southeast Ohio. I first met some like-minded gardeners when I started volunteering at the Hocking Hills Monarch Way Station in 2019. Several of these volunteers introduced me to the Wild Ones, and we formed our seedling chapter in 2020. When we say public native garden or demonstration garden, we mean a garden that's intentionally planted with native species and is open for the public to visit. These spaces are more than gardens. They are tools for education and advocacy. They show what's possible. They support local wildlife, and they help communities see and experience the value of native plants firsthand. When communities see native plants thriving in public spaces, it challenges outdated landscaping norms and shows a more sustainable way forward. These gardens also create natural opportunities for education, whether through signage, workshops, or casual conversations between visitors. Ultimately, public native gardens don't just change landscapes, they help change minds, policies, and communities. We want to take a second to highlight that public native gardens aren't just something we're talking about. They're something Wild Ones chapters are doing all over the country. In 2024, 75% of our chapters were directly involved in public gardens and habitat projects. These projects take many forms, from demonstration gardens at libraries and schools to habitat restorations in public parks. Chapters use these gardens to do the work of advocacy. Educational signage helps normalize native landscapes. Partnerships with schools, cities, and HOAs open doors to wider change, and hands-on community workshops show neighbors what's possible and why it matters. Wild Ones works to help more people experience native plants firsthand and shift how communities think about landscaping. As a Wild One member, I've created 2 native plant demonstration gardens, one at the Bowen House, which is a community center for arts and education in Logan, Ohio, and another at the Logan Community Garden, where I am the garden manager. My goal was to teach people about pollinators and wildlife that depend on native plants for food and shelter. I am especially passionate about teaching people about native bees. Finally, when communities can see native plants thriving in public spaces, it challenges outdated landscaping norms and shows a more sustainable way forward. These gardens also create natural opportunities for education, whether through signage, workshops, or casual conversations between visitors. I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker tonight. It's Nicole Machuca. Nicole is an environmental social scientist with the Keller Science Action Center at the Field Museum in Chicago. Her work focuses on community engagement and research. With nearly 20 years of experience at the intersection of social and environmental issues, Nicole brings deep insight into how public spaces like gardens can shape conservation behavior and build community capacity.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Nicole Machuca. I am an environmental social scientist in the Keller Science Action Center at the Field Museum in Chicago. And today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite places in the entire city, and that is our Rice Native Gardens. And before I continue, I want to shout out 2 colleagues who couldn't be here today, Laura Milker and Catherine Hu in my department. But I also want to shout out the many folks at the Field Museum who help maintain and promote the gardens. It is an interdepartmental effort, and I hope I do everyone proud today. So if you don't know, the Field Museum is a natural history museum, and its mission is to connect us all to the natural world and the human story. And the Keller Science Action Center, my department, translates museum science and collections into action for conservation and quality of life. And I know we have folks from all over the country and North America on this call. And in case you don't know, Chicago is located right in the southwestern corner of Lake Michigan. And because I live right on the border next to Indiana, I get to have 2 Wild Ones chapters. So I want to shout out West Cook Wild Ones, which serves the greater Chicagoland area, and Gibson Woods, which serves northwestern Indiana. So today we're going to talk about the garden's origin story. I'll talk about the ecology of the gardens. I'll talk about how we engage community members and visitors of the gardens. I'll look at this question of the gardens as inspiration, and then some final thoughts for you. So to talk about the beginning of the gardens, I'm going to go pretty far back. I'm going to go back to the 1800s. This map is from 1833. And this might seem like a strange place to start, but a lot happened in this decade. And in 1830, I'll actually begin by saying that the Chicagoland area is the traditional homeland of the Three Fires Confederacy that is comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi, and many other indigenous tribes, including the Menominee, the Ho-Chunk, and the Miami. And by 1830, President Andrew Jackson had signed the Indian Removal Act. And in that same year, there was a proposal to change the Chicago River, which at the time was very shallow. Most of the lakefront was wetland, and there was a sandbar at the entrance to the Chicago River. So by 1833, the Congress had approved funds to dredge the Chicago River to make it a deeper channel, which would impact the region for years to come. And then also the Treaty of Chicago was signed by the Three Fires Confederacy, ceding their land to the U.S. government. A couple years later, there was a morning dance performed by 800 Potawatomi men at the Chicago River before they were escorted west by the U.S. military. Many tribes were escorted west by the U.S. military. And then the Chicago River was dredged, and by 1837, the city of Chicago was incorporated. So a lot happened at this time. But pay attention to that heart that represents where the lake or the Field Museum is now. So if we look at the map on the left-hand side of the top corner, you'll kind of see what looked like that old lakefront but most of our Chicago lakefront, about 30 miles of lakefront, is actually fill. So if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that by 1928, the Field Museum had already been built on some fill, and they were continuing to fill in the remainder of the lakefront that, as we know it as today, is no longer wetland. So if we look here in this picture that was taken before 1996, when I was in 6th grade, we can see that the Field Museum is encircled by Lakeshore Drive north and southbound lanes and divided from our sister museums, the Shedd Aquarium and the Adler Planetarium. And that was changed by 1998 when we can say the museum campus was born and the north and southbound lanes were united to the west of the Field Museum. And this is a different view. This is facing downtown, and the Chicago River is just around those high-rise buildings. But about 10 years ago, Field Museum staff had an interesting idea and vision. How can the Field Museum, a natural history museum centrally positioned in the urban environment and modeled after a Erectium temple of ancient Greece, how can they show that native plants can work both aesthetically in landscaping and provide critical habitat to wildlife? So a design group was hired and designed about 2 acres of what was Kentucky bluegrass. That's what our non-native species that we use in our lawn landscaping in this area. They removed that Kentucky bluegrass and some concrete, and then the rice native gardens were born. So here's a view from the east side of our north stairs before and after. I know it's a little blurry here, but I love this photo anyway. Here's the west side of the stairs before. We can see some of the original landscaping right after it was planted. And if you are familiar with native plant gardens, you know that they can look different, not only from season to season, but year to year. So here is a view from the north side. And I do want to highlight that this section that you're seeing is actually not the Rice Native Gardens formally. This is part of museum campus, which is an effort from the city of Chicago, the Chicago Park District, and then our sister, like I said, our sister museums. We are all invested in adding native plants to museum campus. So I'm going to talk about the ecology, and I just want to highlight this is a wild indigo seed pod, and there are little critters inside. There are some weevils in there. So I love this picture. So for folks, again, who don't know, the Chicago lakefront is pretty critical habitat to bird species, not only those that are here annually, but every spring and fall, we have about 5 million birds of 250 bird species that pass through Chicago, the Chicagoland area, and are particularly dependent on the Chicago lakefront for their habitat. And a very sad anecdote to reflect that. In 2023 fall, there was a strange wind event that happened, and we have this conference center right south of the museum. And in one night period after that wind shift, there was a bird kill event of 1,000 birds in one night. And since then, the conference center that you can see here has adopted some bird-friendly practices and changing their windows and lighting and stuff like that. So pretty critical bird habitat here in the lakefront and the Rice Native Gardens. We also have about 160 prairie plants and shrubs that call the Rice Native Gardens home. And we have some non-native plants and invasive species that have found their way into the gardens, but a variety of plants that serve many critters. And we have a few departments who are doing research in the Rice Native Gardens, but we do use iNaturalist to collect information about what species are here. So just shouting this out as a tool if you don't already incorporate it into your existing garden, or if you're thinking about establishing one, how you can use it. We have ascribed a boundary to the Field Museum, and so far we have 773 species. And just showing this graph over time, which is not necessarily reflective of the growth of the species. It could be about who's contributing, but I wanted to highlight the breakdown, particularly of insects, because I have my moth earrings on today. I am a huge contributor of iNaturalist data. Here are some of the charismatic pollinators that we know and love in our region, but also some of the underappreciated moths and pollinating moths and flies. And I love to find them and capture them on photo. So how do we engage community in the Rice Native Garden? So we do that in a couple different ways. So the Rice Native Gardens, which I realized I didn't say was, we couldn't have done it without the support of the Rice Family Foundation. They were critical to establishing the gardens. But we do have signage throughout the gardens, and the Rice Native Gardens is our largest exhibit at the Field Museum. We also do tours. So this is a screenshot of my stepsister's Instagram account. She was on a tour. She's an urban farmer in the city. And I saw that she posted this, and she says, "I love this cuss word." And just, I know that she's been pretty invested in native plants. So I just thought that was fun. So we give tours at the museum. But we also do some deeper engagement work. So this is from 2018. This is the first workshop that where we invited a community partner, and this partner was the American Indian Center of Chicago. And about 25 folks came out to learn about the native plants in the area, prairie plants, and how to harvest and then clean the seed. And I want to highlight Laura Milkert, who I mentioned I work with, is in the bottom left-hand corner there. And Catherine and I, we started in 2022, and we are continuing this model of how to use the gardens to inspire by training community partners and inviting them here, providing transportation. In some cases, it's very dependent on what's going on and funding availability. But we do have to consider transportation when we are bringing folks into central downtown, more or less, or when we're going out to community. And we teach them how to harvest seed, and then they can take the seed home. And then here we can see Catherine in the Field Museum shirt. So a different thing that we do to engage community members begins at home in the Field Museum. So we invite staff across the museum to relax, enjoy nature by collecting seed, meet new staff. And this is pretty important to the next two things I'm going to talk about. But this past fall, staff across many departments collected about 4 pounds of native seed. So what do we do with that seed? Well, one thing we do is we prepare it for mailing out to community partners. So this past January, we had 800 seed packets of about 30 species that were mailed to our partners that include libraries, nonprofits, and community gardens. And then they use that seed either to plant on their ground. And many folks use that for stocking their seed libraries and providing seed programming and pollinator programming. So I want to highlight the seed packet. One thing a lot of folks don't know is, in our region especially, because we're so used to annuals, that native seed oftentimes needs to be prepared in some way, often with stratification. So the seed packet helps us communicate very easily what the needs of the seeds are, but also it allows those folks who are creating their own seed libraries to communicate that in an easy way. Even if they print it out in paper and cut it off and staple it to the seed packet, it helps save them a lot of writing and steps like that. So just want to highlight that. The other thing that we do is we grow native plants in partnership with the University of Illinois at Chicago greenhouse. And we grow seeds from either the Rice Native Garden seed or some nursery seed that we do purchase. And we distribute them at community events all around Chicagoland. And the other way that we use those seeds and then the plants that we grow is we establish native plant gardens or add to folks' gardens. So we have a community partner here that I want to highlight. This is Eco House, a nonprofit farm in Chicago. And they have a social enterprise arm, Southside Blooms, that began to use native plants in their bouquets. And we did a session, one of those native plant bouquets into the Field Museum's Economic Botany collection, the first in 100 years. So it is a pretty noteworthy outcome of that work. So how do we know that the gardens inspire and lead to action? So I mentioned Museum Campus before and the investment of the City of Chicago and Chicago Park District and the sister museums. So we were curious about what our attitudes are about the native plantings that folks were seeing across all of the landscape. And we had signs across museum campus. That was the last image. And what we found was from the 271 respondents who chose and to submit the survey based on that sign, 99% had a positive reaction to that type of naturalized native plants that they were seeing. 84% said that they loved it. So just want to shout out that result. Most of the folks were Chicago residents, most from the neighboring South Loop neighborhood. But we do, of course, have a lot of other U.S. Visitors and non-U.S. residents who come to the gardens. So one quote that talks about how we may inspire folks. Someone wrote in that survey, "Gardens such as the ones at the Field Museum inspired me to start the process to install a community garden near where I live." Someone else said, "I do love the native plants, something that could have been here before. I like the signage about the plants. The plants bring hummingbirds and butterflies. I love the lawn and the planters, but the native plants are my favorite. I love that they are native to Illinois." And over 200 of those folks who did that survey said that they would like to see more native plants and perennial plants in the areas that are currently lawn. So it's a different survey that we did. This is to the folks who were the recipients of the seed that we had mailed, and we were curious how they were using them. So as you can see here, a lot of folks were distributing those in seed libraries. Some were informally sharing them. And we had 6 respondents in 2023 say that they were actually growing them in trays and then doing their own plant distributions. And then this is the results of the following year. So if you're inspired, this was the workshop surveys. So we also did some surveys on the workshops. We had asked those folks after the 2 to 3 hour workshop, if you were inspired to take action, please describe what that action is. And I just want to note really quickly the pie chart on the left-hand side that 27 folks said that they were inspired to take at least one action. So I personally think that's pretty powerful out of the 30. And then a lot of different actions from starting a native plant garden to planting for more pollinators than just our charismatic species. And then doing some other things like growing seedlings and holding workshops and stuff like that. Someone wrote, "This was awesome. Please continue. Seeing a native landscape at an institution like the Field Museum helps me bolster the case for native gardens landscapes in residential contexts." So that's a pretty powerful quote there. And then just showing all the zip codes from the plant distributions who were taking. So the green represents where there was a free plant distribution. And then the zip codes, the yellow borders show who we were reaching through that plant distribution. So some final thoughts with you. Not only did I want to show you some of those, the survey results, and there were some other methods that I didn't really talk about there, like intercept survey. It's basically a very short in-person, like 5-minute survey. If you're ever stopped in a street, that's what and ask some questions, that's what that is. But hopefully you're maybe inspired to think about how you can document change with what you're doing in your garden. So if you are someone who already has an established demonstration garden, and you're trying to advocate for more funding, maybe you're writing grants, maybe you're trying to get buy-in from your municipality, your representatives, accumulating quotes and some quantitative information, like I showed you before, can be something you can leverage to make your case about what you're doing or what you're trying to expand. Relationship building is something that maybe this isn't the most profound thing to say, but I do want to emphasize that both relationships internally within your group and externally are critically important. And this is related to this next point about being strategic. So, of course, the Field Museum is not an advocacy organization, but I historically have some work at a advocacy nonprofit. And I just want to put this here because I think some folks, if you're starting out, if you're trying to get buy-in and you don't necessarily have that yet, like in Chicago, it feels, at least in my bubble, like there's a lot of momentum around native plants. But a lot of folks who are starting out are trying to get that buy-in from those who are decision makers. Sometimes people just come out of the gate pounding their fists to the table, and that can be alienating, and that's a strategy. So what taking off my field museum hat and just going to my personal experiences, just want to convey to you that if you are maybe in an area that doesn't have a lot of momentum, I would recommend community organizing training, because that will teach you a lot about how to be strategic and the tactics that you're using to make change. Stay the course. So again, have that. It takes time. It is not something that can happen overnight most of the time, and it's a lot of advocacy effort and a lot of accumulating and information and staying the course. So just want to motivate you to not give up. Nothing good is ever easy most of the time. And my final comment is to elicit awe, and this is from a whole other set of research that we're doing that I didn't talk about today. But this quote, I think, makes this point. The milkweed, was just beautiful, just swaying in the wind. And oh, one of the master naturalists said, "Look at this. There's a milkweed. Let's see if there's an egg." And he turned it over. There's a monarch egg. I go, "What?" So he taught that to me. This is before they were part of the project. And so since then, it was just that wonder, like, wow, being a kid again. When you first see it, I have now a new puppy. Everything is new to her. A bird, she can't believe it can fly. An airplane, she just saw an airplane. She was just staring at the airplane. She couldn't believe it. That was how I felt. It was like, wow, that's a monarch egg. And then to see the caterpillar and all, that was amazing. And for the kids to see it too, that was really fun. It's that wonder, that surprise of being my age and learning something new like that. It was amazing. It was beautiful. So I want to share this quote to say that not only can we inspire awe in children, but don't underestimate the awe that you can inspire by creating experiences for adults as well. They're just as powerful. And that is my presentation. I want to thank everyone so much. Again, my name is Nicole Machuca. You can reach me at Machuca at Field Museum, Catherine Hu at Field Museum, and Laura Milker at lmilker@fieldmuseum.org. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nicole. I think your work adds a lot to this conversation. Next, we'll hear case studies from 2 Wild Ones chapters that spent the last year creating a demonstration garden from scratch. First, we'll hear from Chelsea Gastelum, Demonstration Garden Chair for Wild Ones San Diego. Chelsea leads native plant education and garden projects in her community and is also the founder of the Busy Bee Gardens Co-op, a volunteer group creating pollinator habitats throughout Lemon Grove, California. Through her work in public gardens, schools, and private spaces, Chelsea focuses on hands-on education and community empowerment to advance native plant advocacy. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you so much. So I'm starting our picture here, the slides, in our garden demonstration area that we are working on in San Diego. And I'll start out with a little bit of an introduction with myself. So I was probably the only one who was looking for a Wild Ones chapter. And every so often I was checking in, like, do we have one yet in San Diego? Do we have one yet in California? Do we have one yet? Because I was already working with a lot of natives in a garden area for me. All of a sudden one day I go in, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a San Diego chapter, and I joined right away. So that is how I was finally able to find a local chapter for us. They created one and it came to me. So I think I wished our San Diego chapter into existence. So the large picture that you see on the left upper hand screen, this is one of our local service groups. It's called the Lemon Grove Forward Club. So these people came out and helped a bit in our garden after they finished up a trash cleanup someplace else. So, connecting with service groups can really be beneficial. In the lower left-hand corner, the picture there, this is actually the middle person is the principal of the school we put our demonstration garden into. And then we have people who work on the school board and everything that are out here pulling weeds, putting down cardboard, establishing gardens, and everything else. And all the way to the right lower corner, one of the people that we have, the lady with the hat, she's actually our school district's superintendent. So, when you get out there with community, have people roll up their sleeves and help, it can make a really big difference. And now into the school where we are putting in our demonstration garden. And I really, really want to point out the significance of this demonstration garden. It is a Title I school. Even for this school district, this particular school is severely underfunded. And, they have to make cuts on a regular basis. They have to make decisions on a regular basis that they don't want to make. But it has to be done, and I get that. Meanwhile, these kids were going to school where every part of the green that you see on the ground was covered in this goat head weed. And the goat head weed, when green, like you see in the up close picture, is probably the kindest version of this, because when these seeds dry and break apart in those little divided areas, it is like a medieval torture device. It is so bad that when one of our male big Navy chiefs who was out here working volunteer time to help us clean up the area, he accidentally lost his balance and fell backwards and landed on both of his hands. And his hands were covered in this goat head weed. And within minutes, it began to swell. And just, the reaction was so bad. The school had told us several times that there was kids that were coming in and they, punctured into their shoe. You couldn't wear open-toed shoes, just a lot of problems that would happen and injuries that happened on the school, but so hard to get in front of after it had been neglected for so long. And you can't just come in and spray a bunch of poisons because it is a school. So, you can see both areas down here where it was just completely covered. When I started this project, I started it as a Busy Bee Garden Co-op project where we came in and the only way to deal with this was to lay down cardboard over all of this. So we pulled as much as we possibly could. We laid down cardboard and we threw a thick layer of mulch. And, we had wet everything down first, I should say, so that every seed would sprout. We laid this cardboard down and we walked away from it for almost a year. During that time, I was able to establish that connection and become the demonstration chair with the Wild Ones chapter here in San Diego. And then the opportunity came along to establish this demonstration garden with the grant through Wild Ones. And really, our president came and said, hey, I think this is something that would really help. And that is how we decided that this would be the place we wanted our demonstration garden in. This is what that area is now. And through the establishment, we're still working. This is a newly established garden. Our landscape designer created a beautiful natural landscape that now goes through that area that was covered with weeds. And you can see, I'm going to go back a slide real quick, because you can maybe make out in front of that building that there is the coyote statue, which is their mascot over there. And now what we've done is made it where this mascot is highlighted along this path in an island that it will be a pathway for kids to be able to walk through. It was also very important to the landscape designer, to us, and to several people in Wild Ones. Our local chapter, I should say, actually has a lot of educators in it. And so they understand the significance of having things in a school and doing and working within a school garden. So it was very important to come up with this pathway that was also wheelchair friendly, so that all of the students at the school would be able to benefit, learn from, and be inside of this garden, not just walk past it. And again, the community came out, they rolled up their sleeves. People who were sitting behind desks or people who did other things, they came out to really be a part of creating this. So again, it's a matter of bringing people together. It's a matter of making people appreciate the plants that they see, have an understanding of the plants, the significance it brings to the biodiversity of our neighborhoods, and how we can have a team building experience together while we are creating these gardens. And you also have a better connection with your neighbors. You feel safer and you feel a connection to people when you're working alongside them. You see them out in out in your neighborhood when you're at the grocery store or a restaurant or anything else, and you're like, oh wait, I know you. Strangers who just come together to establish these gardens, it really does make a difference, and it's really one of the most inspiring things to see when I work alongside people, especially when we have new people or strangers come up, or what we've had lately where we have people from cities outside of ours that see what we do and just want to be a part of making a really big difference with these native plants and native pollinators. So thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. I really appreciate the effort you put into engaging youth at these demonstration gardens. Next, representing the Wild Ones Capital Region New York chapter, we have chapter president Rosemary Mix. Rosemary founded the chapter in 2021 and has worked to build strong partnerships and thriving local networks dedicated to native plants. Drawing from her experience managing her own 17-acre property and her background in organic farming and environmental education, Rosemary believes that every yard and project, big or small, contributes to a larger movement for ecological health. Welcome, Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for the introduction. The Capital Region New York chapter launched in 2021 to connect people and native plants across our area, and we are making an impact. Native plants and natural landscapes are finding their way into our communities. Collaboration is on the rise. Membership is steadily growing. Advocacy efforts are gaining ground, and educational opportunities are expanding. I am proud to lead this wonderful and hopeful organization. The Unity Garden is one of our key projects. It's a demonstration garden that brings education, beauty, and hands-on learning to the community. I'm excited to share how this garden is becoming a hub for community engagement and advocacy, and how partnerships have been essential every step of the way. From the start, we had a clear vision for what this garden could be. It wasn't just about planting native species. It was about creating a space for learning, connection, and community action. We wanted to host seed collection workshops and use the garden as a living classroom. Through volunteer work days and plant sales, we sought to involve the congregation and local residents. We aimed to transform the space into a vibrant native habitat that would be beautiful and ecologically beneficial. Strengthening existing relationships within our community was central to our vision. I want to start by sharing how this garden came to be and the story behind why we chose the space, what we hoped to achieve, and who helped us bring it to life. We considered 3 potential sites for this project, but ultimately, the Unity Lutheran Church stood out, and here's why. The church grounds are highly visible and accessible to the public, a perfect opportunity for community engagement. The site had great potential for development and restoration. And unlike other sites, Unity Church genuinely needed our help. Another location we considered planned to proceed with or without us, but here our involvement was essential to making the project a reality. A project like this takes a community, and we couldn't have done it alone. We're grateful to everyone who played a part in making this garden a reality. Wild Ones, our chapter, led the project from planning to planting. Unity Lutheran of Albany, our host and enthusiastic partner, congregation members became volunteers and advocates. Local residents joined work days, helped with fundraising, and shared their skills. Our garden designer provided the vision and planning for the native garden. Our matching funds donor helped us reach our fundraising goal and made the project possible. The local planning board supported the project and included input from their tree committee, which helped us align with local conservation goals. The seed funding for this project came from a grant funded by Monarch Joint Venture and the U.S. Forest Service international programs. Once we had the vision, the next step was to get the green light to make it happen. Sometimes this can be a challenge, but in our case, the path was surprisingly smooth. A member of our team, who is also a skilled grant writer, submitted a proposal to Wild Ones National, and we were thrilled when it was approved. Unity Church was equally supportive. They believed in our mission and welcomed the opportunity to host the garden. We didn't face zoning issues or municipal pushback, just a shared enthusiasm to bring the project to life. With approvals in hand, we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. We started with a Zoom call and site visit to understand the space. Design proposals came in from local native landscapers, and we voted on the best fit. Our designer created a comprehensive plan, but we decided to start small, phasing the project for manageability. We presented our phased approach to the church, which was fully on board. To cover our costs with matching fund support, we launched a separate fundraiser and raised $2,500, bringing our total budget to $5,000. Volunteers came together for 3 workdays, each 2 hours, to prepare the soil. We secured 11 yards of arborist wood chips and stacks of newspaper. Volunteers of all abilities contributed. Some spread mulch, while others prepared newspapers for layering. Planting Day and the Flora for Fauna Festival, we sourced native plants from local vendors. Volunteers carefully followed the design plan, which was guided by tongue depressors marking planting spots. And to help visitors understand, we added plant signs with care instructions to the festival. Every project has its surprises, and ours was no different. But it's not about avoiding challenges, it's about adapting to them. The original plan covered a large area, too large for our volunteer team and budget. So we broke it into manageable phases. We focused on what we could achieve with the volunteers we had and completing phase 1 at the Flora for Fauna Festival in August of 2024. We installed a critter fence with a gate in order to discourage resident woodchucks from helping themselves to the plants. So from an idea to a fully planted garden, our journey was a mix of planning, partnerships, and problem solving. But beyond the plants and pathways, this garden has become something more, a powerful tool for advocacy and education. This garden shows how demonstration gardens do more than look good. They actively engage people. From educational signage to hands-on planting for kids, every interaction helps build awareness and interest in native plants. The garden's impact goes beyond the church property. Attendees left inspired to bring native plants into their own yards. That's the advocacy power of public gardens. They spark curiosity, build community, and turn passive interest into action. At Unity Church, we saw how native plant gardens can spark curiosity and excitement for kids. During the Flora for Fauna Fest, children took the lead in planting, getting their hands in the soil and learning firsthand what native plants do for pollinators. After the event, the church's pastor, along with children from the congregation's after-school program, took on the daily watering. This type of hands-on engagement not only helps the plants thrive, but also helps young people build lifelong connections to nature. As we look ahead, we see even more opportunities for youth-focused programs at this garden, from plant ID scavenger hunts to community science projects. The next step for this garden is planting a hedgerow along the site's edge to add structure and expand habitat. At the same time, we're pausing to assess a few challenges, including nearby diseased ash trees, upcoming playground construction, and limited volunteer capacity. One takeaway so far is the importance of right-sizing demonstration gardens. Smaller, well-placed gardens can be easier to maintain and serve as accessible models for homeowners and community groups. Looking ahead, the long-term success of this space depends on keeping it active. Through education, workshops, refreshed signage, and ongoing community partnerships, our plan is to keep people engaged long after planting day. Every project teaches valuable lessons, and here's what we discovered along the way. Inspire action with manageable projects. Our goal was to spark a love for native plants and inspire community members to act in their own spaces. However, we learned that smaller, more approachable demonstration gardens may be more effective in motivating people to try native plants at home. Start small, scale for success. The large size of our garden plan was exciting but overwhelming for many. Many demonstration gardens can be easier to maintain, replicate, and still have a powerful impact. Plus, they reduce the intimidation factor for beginners. Match the scale to volunteer capacity. A project should reflect the team's size and commitment. We recommend a rule of thumb, 1 volunteer per 10 square feet. Scaling to your volunteer capacity ensures you can complete and maintain the project effectively. We also learned the importance of having an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, in place before starting. And it can clearly define the roles and responsibilities, who is doing what, and how many people from each group are contributing. And also to outline long-term maintenance, if, how, and when maintenance transitions away from Wild Ones to our partner organization. In closing, this project reminded us that demonstration gardens are more than just beautiful landscapes. They are tools for change. They educate, inspire, and empower people to take meaningful action. Most importantly, you don't need a large space or a big budget to make an impact. Start small, focus on education, and build strong community partnerships. Your garden, no matter the size, can be a catalyst for change. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for the great presentations. Now it's time for us to move on to our panel discussion. So our first topic that we are going to discuss is advocacy beyond the garden. What has been the most effective way you've seen a public or demonstration garden inspire real action, whether in policy change, personal gardening, or community engagement? Chelsea, would you like to start us off with this discussion?
Yes, because obviously that has been what my topic was about. I'm always get excited about gardens that we have established and seeing people interact in the gardens. But because some of these gardens are along school paths that children and families walk through on a regular basis, we are able to help keep that garden inspiration going. And then to top it off, we've got the seed libraries that go into these public spaces as well. And some of the envelopes that we leave are blank seed envelopes where people could go and collect them on their own and grow the plant that they like. And other envelopes are labeled and people know what they're doing and can take it home and grow these specific plants that we're adding in there. In the case of Mariposa Lane, we also include things like stumps that are designed for tic-tac-toe boards for children to stop and play. And our tic-tac-toe, instead of X's and O's, they're bees and butterflies. So that gives a little bit of time for families to stop and linger in the garden just a little bit longer, which usually also gets kids to notice like bees or butterflies that are flying by, something a little bit more than just I walked through this garden.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
Sure. I'd be happy to add a little bit about our experience with the demonstration garden that we just recently initiated phase 1 of. But the volunteers that came and worked at the garden were provided 2 native plants of their choosing to take home and use for their own personal garden projects. One volunteer was inspired to initiate another public native garden in a nearby library. And beginner volunteers learned planting techniques, and experienced volunteers mentored those that were less knowledgeable. And during the plant sale we had, experienced gardeners were available to answer questions. So we were able to really help a lot of beginner level people move forward with their native plantings and ideas.
Nicole, do you have anything to add or?
Yeah, I'll chime in too. I think that, again, there's a lot of things happening in Chicago. A lot of people are doing native plant initiatives. So you can't say it's the Field Museum, but, there are two partners that I've particularly worked with where, again, they've had other influences. They've come in with an interest in native plants, but they're two community partners because, again, the Field Museum is right against the lake and we serve all of Chicagoland essentially. But I've seen partners because of the technical assistance that we've given them, bringing them in for workshops, giving them the seeds and visiting them on site to help them. They're growing their own plants now. They're doing their own work in their own community, and even trying to influence at what we have in Chicago, the ward level. So yeah, I definitely think it's happening, and I'm happy to be a part of that.
And I can say, I know in our community, I have noticed that more and more people are starting to plant native plants just in their normal landscaping, just around the areas where we have some of our demonstration gardens. We do a big giveaway in the spring and in the fall of native plants. And I'm just seeing more and more of these plants as I'm walking down the street, and it just makes me smile every time I see, our native plants getting out into the community, and it's really inspiring to just see, everybody really taking part in their local landscaping and improving, I think, the ecosystem of our town. Okay, our next question is community engagement. How do you ensure a public or demonstration garden remains relevant and actively used by the community over time? This is a good question and something I struggle with. So I'm going to ask Rosemary to start this one off.
Okay. In terms of the garden that we just recently put in, our plan was to do seed collection workshops, which is something that a lot of people have interest in, and other relevant programs. The church that we partnered with also plans on using it for different ideas and programs for children of their congregation, and invite various school districts and community groups to come and enjoy the garden. Also, we'll have planned maintenance days, work party days. And, we'll have to wait and see how the public engagement really works because we're just starting out. We're at the very beginning of this project, but it's very exciting. So thank you.
Chelsea.
So our demonstration garden is actually located inside of the elementary school. And that means we have somebody there 5 days a week that are looking in this garden. But to keep this garden relevant, we also have a garden club that has been started at this school. So our demonstration garden is alongside of a vegetable garden. And the students at this elementary school through this garden club are learning the connection of pollinators to their food. And in looking for things that could be used in the school to teach things, we were able to obtain some of the educational materials from places like the Xerces Society, Monarch Joint Venture, and we also found some information on how to have these students become junior master gardeners. And that actually has a whole topic on the wildlife side, and then it has the topic that is on the vegetable gardening side. So having this used as an active educational garden, that'll help keep it relevant.
Nicole?
Yeah, I think we benefit from being on museum campus and having, probably, I don't know, millions of visitors a year. what was interesting from the passive survey and the intercept surveys that we had done is because again, we are serving not just Chicagoland, but we have visitors who come from all over the world. So we do have a lot of the South Loop residents. It's a lot of high rises. They are coming and using the lakefront as their backyard. So I don't necessarily think that it's something that I can't foresee it becoming irrelevant at this point. But I do think the benefit of the space is that it has paths. It has shade. That was something else that came up for you all thinking about this things to think about as you're thinking about engaging communities. Shade really came out as something pretty important. But yeah, I mean, I think that it is relevant. It's novel and new. I've seen a lot of people walk through the garden who are clearly visitors and like, oh my God, look at these plants. It's clearly new to them. And then, again, from those surveys, people are saying that it brings them great joy to visit the gardens throughout the museum. So just keep it up, I guess.
I know one of the things that we really like to do is just try to get as many of our volunteers as possible on the same day, do a work day together. And there's a big sense of camaraderie when you have all of these people who really enjoy gardening, they can come in and do the work together. So I found that that's a really great way to get our volunteers and to keep them coming to keep working in those gardens. So the next topic is about equity and accessibility. How can public and demonstration gardens be designed and managed to be more inclusive, accessible, and welcoming to diverse communities? I'll start again with Chelsea.
This one is exciting. So this is the entire premise of the Busy Bee Garden Co-op that I discussed during my presentation, which is a Neighbors Helping Neighbors initiative to install these native pollinator plants. So we are running our whole program without any money or funding from any outside sources. We've been fortunate to be able to get plants through grants, and that has been very helpful. So no money, just the plants. But we are turning around and making it equitable for all people by, one, putting these into underserved communities and into areas that were in distress and overgrown. They were full of weeds, and we were removing them and planting the natives. So we're changing the landscape of what our children are seeing on their way to school. Once overridden with weeds or grass so high it went over some children's head and, crossed over sidewalks that interfered with them walking to school. And we turned these into native gardens that now are growing life. These paths that allow kids to get to school that don't have these weeds or anything. They're Title I schools, which means they're 100% funded. These children have the entire school is funded for free lunches. So these are very underserved communities. For people that are out in the community themselves that find it hard, our co-op basis of saying you come and help with us by giving an hour or two of your time, then you can put your front yard up for us to come remake, and we bring in the whole crew of the volunteers that come over and remake your garden with these pollinator plants. That takes away a lot of cost of labor for people that wouldn't be able to change these over. In addition, our program gives out over 500 plants to the community every year at plant and seed swaps that are completely free. So my house looks like a nursery most of the time. I grow these native plants in pots, and I grow through a program here in California called the Monarch Fellowship that sends seeds out to various people in the communities that want to be a hub. And this hub provides the seeds, you grow the plants, you give them out into your community. So we're giving away all these native plants for free. We're having our seed libraries that are able to, like, anybody can walk up at any time and have them. Our seed libraries, we are up to 4 now. And our native seed libraries are located one of them is in one of our historical museums. We've got the 2 on the school paths that you saw in the presentation, and we have been very fortunate to have one of our local restaurants that also has a seed library in there also. So anybody can walk up to these at any time. It removes a cost barrier for people to be able to come and get these native plants and seeds.
Rosemary, do you have anything to add?
That sounded really, really good. In terms of our project, the garden and the grounds, remain open to the public. It's a public place, and if people want to come and access it, it's really easily accessible by bus and is across from a major shopping center, which is a highly visible area.
Nicole.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. One, the Field Museum again is centrally located, but our neighbors expand all across the city. I'm the furthest, you could say, from the museum where I live. So when we think about the gardens as community engagement specifically, we have to be cognizant about assisting folks with the resources to bring them in. So we've partnered with some partners, and we figured out some funding opportunities to get a bus to bring people to the museum. Sometimes parking is something we can accommodate for folks who are driving in, but it's something we have to think about. It is not easy. When I was much younger, as someone who would drive as a teenager, I could park for a quarter on museum campus, and it is not like that anymore. So it's something to think about. And then the other thing, we go out. We have to go out into the communities that we're talking about serving. So we have deep partnerships with culturally rooted institutions like TOE is one of our partners in Roots and Routes. That would be a good example of actually providing buses to come in for programming. But we partner with the Nature Conservancy in Indiana for their Festival de la Monarca. And they have some other partners that I can't think of the name now, but that's one of our biggest plant distribution events. And that is a very culturally rooted festival because of the significance of the monarch butterfly as an ancestor. And that is carried by many cultural groups in our area. And there are many others, connections to plants I'm thinking about from some interviews I've done and read from the Field Museum when we were doing climate action work. The Polish community is very connected to plants and heritage. It's very shared. I have Filipino family who is very connected to the moth and ancestors. So there's ways to connect heritage where it's a celebration. So I'd say, in short, bringing people in, going out to communities, and celebrating heritage, I think, are the 3 ways to think about how to be more inclusive and diverse.
Oh, those are all great answers. I love it. And I love the idea of, free plants. I think that's really important. We try to do that in our community as well. And seed giveaways is really important too. And just, again, being an accessible public garden is just so important. Here's a question that was submitted during registration. We had so many, but we could only pick one. How to balance naturalistic design with public perception, avoiding messy stigma. Rosemary, do you want to start on that one?
That's a challenging one, but I will say that our garden designer took that into consideration when she created the design for the garden and put in a nice blend of shrubs and nectar plants. So I don't know. We'll see how it grows in. It hasn't even, it's not even been a year yet since it was put into the ground.
And I'll just speak up and say, I know, one of the tricks that we use, we often try to grow things that are a little shorter so people aren't, seeing big floppy plants. Even though I love the big giant cup plant and things like that, I know a lot of people don't like that. So we try to use a lot of plants that are short, that bloom for maybe a long period of time. Our designs are also, to include blooms from spring to fall. And so when people look at our gardens, they just go, oh my gosh, this is just so beautiful. We don't want anybody to think, oh my gosh, this is a weed patch. This is messy. So we have to be careful about that. I know that, in dealing with different people, they just have different aesthetics. But I think avoiding those big, giant, tall plants are an important thing when designing some of these gardens. Chelsea, do you have anything to add about that?
I agree that sometimes you really do have to limit the size of a plant and everything. We are way down in Southern California, so we're very close to the Mexican border where we are. And our stuff starts to look messy and a little more disheveled towards the end of summer and into our fall, which remains pretty warm. And so a lot of times when things are looking scraggly and our seed pods are drying and we haven't really had a chance to go out and clean the garden, I like to remind people that it is nature's design that all of a sudden these areas that are cold and these birds that are flocking south, it's nature's design that it's right on time for those winter birds that are coming in. Our gardens are straggly and we've got seed pods to feed them. So it's nature's bird feeder. And to then turn around and start saying, hey, maybe I should pay attention to the birds that are coming in, and using a program like Merlin and getting them encouraged into the bird watching. And then they kind of don't feel like the messiness is important. And then when we get a chance, we go in and we like to do cleanup and things like that. So just trying to help the public change their perception of how a garden is used.
Nicole?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on those answers. I do wish Catherine and Laura were here because they'd probably have opinions. I think you just have to know your space first. Again, I'm not the one with the planting expertise, but, my garden is like 4 feet by 8 feet, and the compass plant does not work for that. I have replanted it and will continue for the same height. And the Bryce native gardens, that works fine. So knowing your space, and there's a lot of maintenance that happens. So there's some native plants that have very dandelion-y, which in our area, folks look at that as weedy. So just knowing your space, maintenance, and then piggybacking on Chelsea particularly, something I was thinking of saying earlier around being relevant is inspiring awe. And I think, Chelsea, what you were just saying, it makes me think of that. There's that connection. It doesn't just happen in youth. It happens with adults. We found some of the research that I did not present today. Adults can experience awe and revelation as well. So think about ways you can elicit that experience with your folks, because sometimes, at least in prairie plants and our naturalized landscaping, people can welcome the messiness a little bit more when they realize the significance to the creatures that it's attracting, not just the birds, but the pollinator visitors, even the wasps. So that's kind of what we've been finding, is that people have changed their view when they're constantly experiencing the place. So also sometimes it's okay if you have a very landscaped natural garden. We have some of those plantings in the larger museum campus as well.
All right. So here's a key takeaway. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a new chapter or community group starting their first demonstration garden? Who would like to take that? I'll go with Rosemary.
Okay. Well, we're just fresh off of this. So actually, our advice is to consider your placement and your visibility and the usage by all the organizations involved, and have your goals figured out in advance of starting the project and taking it from there.
That's great advice. Chelsea.
The San Diego chapter of Wild Ones is actually fairly new. So we've only been around since 2023, and we jumped into this demonstration garden with Wild Ones pretty quickly. But I would say, one, just go for it. It's a garden, and we know over and over again we've seen mistakes. You take out a plant, you replace it with something else. Just go for it. Things can be moved, things can be changed. I think if we let the fear hold us back a little too much, we're stepping on our own toes. Nothing can't be corrected or changed.
No mistakes, just happy accidents. Nicole?
I was going to say, look up what plants are aggressive, but I think Chelsea, converted me to just saying it's kind of the part of the process. I don't think I've ever met someone who has a home garden or a larger garden where they wish they didn't plant something, or they're battling even a native species that can be like in our area, tall golden, one of the goldenrods, not the Canada, but we have another one that it can be aggressive and, go all over the place. So it's just part of the rite of passage to becoming a native plant gardener, I think. But I was, we in our region have quite a few nurseries that have really great search queries. So like Prairie Moon Nursery is one Minnesota that comes to mind that we can use in Chicago. But yeah, like look at your shade and, look at what your needs are for your site and have fun. It shouldn't, even when you are like, oh, I'm pulling this out and starting again, it's an enjoyable, fun thing. You kind of get hooked on it. So just enjoy it and welcome the experiment. It's all an experiment at the end of the day, really.
That's a really good point too about when you mentioned Prairie Moon. I was thinking also of just some of our in Ohio, we've gotten a ton of new native plant nurseries, and they're so willing to help and just give you advice and they have so many favorite plants that they want people to take and like learn about and plant. And so it's really wonderful to, reach out to those native plant nurseries in your local area to find out what plants, would work in your area, what kind of plants would work good in a really small yard versus a, really large meadow area or whatever type of space you have. So it's great to reach out to those types of places. Thank you to our panelists for sharing the stories behind these incredible gardens. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. As you've heard, public native gardens do much more than beautify a space. They open up conversations, build connections, and help communities reimagine what's possible in their landscapes. Whether you're part of a Wild Ones chapter, a local partner, or just getting started, we hope today's stories gave you ideas and inspirations you can take back to your own communities. Thanks again for being here. Have a good evening.